It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story tonight. A robotic vehicle dives back into the Atlantic to recover more debris from the sub, where 5 people died exploring the Titanic. As Canada launches its investigation into what happened, the stepson of one of the victims tells Sky News he held out hope right to the very end.
I was so focused on those moments of how special it would be to be with him again. And unfortunately, you know, our hearts were broken.
Also tonight, the Treasury and bank bosses agree to measures to help ease the burden of rising mortgage repayments. But will it be enough to help struggling homeowners?
There will be a minimum 12-month period before there's a repossession without consent.
So we do think in the next 6 to 8 months that the number of calls from potentially distressed customers is going to increase.
A man is found guilty of murdering a police officer inside a police station. We have a special report from Europe's second biggest reservoir, now reduced to a desert, and Ukrainian towns drying up after the attack on the Kakhovka Dam. Plus, we go to Worthy Farm, where Glastonbury Festival is well underway with some special guests. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview that's coming up from 10:30 this evening. Hello there, very good evening to you. The investigation has begun tonight into why the submersible Titan could have imploded while exploring the Titanic. Canada has announced the launch of its probe into the Canadian flagship, the Polar Prince, which carried the sub. And today, a stream of family and friends have paid tribute to the 5 men who were on board, as well as a chorus of criticism for the company OceanGate. But its co-founder has defended the expedition and OceanGate's CEO. Well, on Sunday at 8 a.m, the submersible began its 13,000-foot descent to the Titanic wreckage, about 400 miles off the coast of Newfoundland. It lost communications with its mothership, the Polar Prince, an hour and 45 minutes later. Now, the US Navy says at the same time their network of underwater sensors detected an anomaly consistent with an implosion or explosion in the area. The submersible failed to surface at its scheduled time of 3 p.m. And almost 3 hours later, the US Coast Guard received a report of the missing submersible and its 5 passengers. Crews from the United States, Canada and France joined the search, which spanned an area about the size of Northern Ireland. On Wednesday, debris was found 16,000 feet from the wreckage of the Titanic, containing pieces of the Titan submersible. It was then confirmed that all the crew had died. Sky's US correspondent James Matthews reports now from Boston as the search for more parts of the sub continues.
The tourist traffic continues off North America's coast. These were whale watchers leaving Boston, the benign end of Atlantic attractions. Adventure's other extreme had occupied this city's Coast Guard this week. There was no news today for them to report. The day before had drawn a line under their hunt and hope for a submersible missing at sea. This is video from 2021 of the Titan submersible, with a guided tour from the man behind it. 2 years after these pictures were filmed, Stockton Rush would be among the 5 who died on board.
This and all the lead down here can be dropped in an absolute emergency so you can get to the surface.
Amidst questions over safety, his words then have a dark echo now.
I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General MacArthur said, "You're remembered for the rules you break." And, you know, I've broken some rules to make this.
There has been criticism of the man who built the Titan and its carbon fiber design. But there is also support from a co-founder of his company.
He was a talented engineer, he was a very intelligent person, he was a passionate explorer, but mostly he was a keen risk manager. He was very well aware of the risks of operating at these deep depths, and he was very committed to safety.
US Navy listening gear underneath the waves picked up the sound of an implosion as the Titan made its descent towards the Titanic. There will be investigations into exactly what happened, how and why. For now, we're learning more about who was on board, the 5 who perished. 19-year-old Suleiman Dawood died with his father on board the Titan. His aunt said the student had been scared of the trip, but didn't want to disappoint his father Shahzada on a Father's Day weekend. The British billionaire Hamish Harding was described by his family as a boy who grew to be a dedicated father, a man who lived for his next adventure. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, the French Navy veteran on board, was remembered by his stepson.
Fearless. This is warm burst of energy I always got from being with him. He's this incredible human being. I mean, we can, talk forever about his impact in the ocean, but for me, the impact was mostly felt out of the ocean.
Out at sea, this was the Odyssey 6K, one of the remotely operated vehicles that discovered debris from the Titan submersible. That search is continuing. Canada's Transportation Safety Board has launched an investigation. This was the scene at Newfoundland in Canada, from where the submersible set sail towards the site where the Titanic sank in 1912. On the North Atlantic shore, they honour the victims of the disaster that followed disaster. James Matthews, Sky News, in Boston.
Well, our international correspondent John Sparks joins us now live from Newfoundland. And John, as we were just talking there, the mothership Polar Prince is expected to arrive sometime tomorrow where you are. And we also know that a Canadian investigation has now begun. It seems to be a long and very complex process ahead.
Yeah, I think that's right, Emma. This investigation, the first of several, I'm sure, potentially many investigations, launched by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. It will investigate the incident from the perspective of the Polar Prince. That's the supply ship that put the submersible Titan in the water last Sunday. And it loaded up. It went out to sea with 17 crew members, 24 in total. It will, as you say, return tomorrow with 5 less people. The safety board, they can only investigate this incident from the perspective of that ship because the submersible doesn't count as a proper vessel, as a proper ship. And that is one way that Stockton Rush, the founder of OceanGate, was able to sidestep the regulations. The safety board will investigate it and they will produce a report which aims to improve transportation safety in Canada. That's the objective here. I can also tell you that we understand a new ROV mission has been launched. ROVs are these remotely operated vehicles, this one provided by a company from Cape Cod in the United States. It's this vehicle that found the debris field near the Titanic on Thursday and alerted the world to the fate of the people on board. This time it's going down to document the area and assist in any direct recovery of debris. Interesting, that direct recovery. I'm sure they will be looking for the bodies, and I'm sure that there is a conversation going on about, if they find them, whether they're brought back to the surface. And I think this incident, this story, it tells us something about the collective pull on the Titanic, on everybody, and particularly on some individuals who are prepared to go to extraordinary lengths to see it in person, in the flesh. And I think there will be a conversation about whether it is necessary to do this, to visit what is, and if so, whether there are better ways to do this safely.
We'll leave it there for now. John Sparks live in St John's Harbour in Newfoundland. Thank you. Now the news tonight. The Chancellor Jeremy Hunt met with leaders of some of Britain's biggest banks, including Lloyds, NatWest, Barclays and Virgin Money today. It follows a decision by the Bank of England to hike interest rates to 5% in an effort to try to get inflation under control. Well, these are the measures. Lenders and the Chancellor agreed that people should be given a 12-month break before repossession proceedings begin. Homeowners will also be able to change their mortgage to interest only and switch back to their original deal within 6 months with no impact to their credit score. And those struggling with repayments will be allowed to speak to their lender to discuss payment options without it having any impact on their credit rating. Sky's Matthew Thompson has more.
Newport is no stranger to hard times, but with interest rates soaring, they're about to get harder. Places like this, where incomes are already stretched, will be amongst the worst affected. This local mortgage broker is already seeing signs of distress.
So we do think in the next 6 to 8 months that the number of calls from potentially distressed customers is going to increase, mainly due to the fact that there's 1.4 million people who are currently on fixed rate deals, which may be historic under 2% deals, coming out onto potentially 6% or higher.
Economists predict that 1.2 million people will go bust this year as a direct result of higher mortgage payments. The biggest impacts will be felt here in Wales and also in the northeast of England. But right across the country, people will be pushed to the brink. People like Benjamin, who despite a decent household income, will still struggle.
So our current amount is 1,400 a month, and that'll be going up to 2,500 a month. So 1,100 extra. Obviously, our electric bills have gone up a couple of £100. Our food's costing us 30, 40 quid more a week. We just don't have that sort of money spare every month. So basically stuck, can't sell the house to get rid of the mortgage, can't pay the mortgage amount. So I don't know what we're going to do in a month's time when it comes to the end of the existing thing.
What did you say to the Chancellor?
Good working level discussion when you think about how we can continue to support mortgage customers.
Today, after a meeting with the Chancellor, banks agreed to provide more support.
People who are at risk of losing their home in that extreme situation, the banks and mortgage lenders have a number of things in place. It's the last thing that they want to do to repossess a home. But in that extreme situation, they've agreed there will be a minimum 12-month period before there's a repossession without consent.
Labour, unsurprisingly, is keen to point the finger at the government.
There are going to be many, many mortgage holders, many families across the country who are now even more worried about paying their mortgage. That's on top of all the other bills. And they know that the government's failed now for 13 years. They know the government crashed the economy last year.
The measures announced today will help, for now. But fears remain that the relief they provide will be temporary, with little sign of interest rates falling anytime soon. Matthew Thompson, Sky News, Newport.
A man who shot dead a Metropolitan Police officer after smuggling a gun into a holding cell has been found guilty of murder. His victim, Sergeant Matt Ratana, was described as a gentle giant. A warning for you that this report by Sky's crime correspondent Martin Brunt includes the moments leading up to Sergeant Ratana's shooting.
You're just going to be searched, mate. You're not under arrest. I just need to search you.
When police stopped and searched Louis de Zoysa in the early hours, they found 7 bullets in his coat pocket. But they didn't discover something even more deadly. At the police station, Sergeant Matt Ratana asked de Zoysa to stand up for a second search. It was then the suspect, somehow in handcuffs, produced an antique revolver from a hidden holster and shot the officer dead. As others grappled with de Zoysa, he fired 3 more bullets. He shot himself and caused brain damage. Sergeant Ratana's partner was in court to hear the guilty verdict.
Today is about the justice for Matt. His life was taken too soon in the line of duty, doing a job that he loved. A cruel end to a lifetime of service and dedication protecting others.
The Met Police Commissioner said Sergeant Ratana made a lasting impression on all who met him.
Whether it was on the streets or in the custody centre, as a uniformed police officer, on the rugby field or later as a coach, it's clear that he was someone who made an enduring impact wherever he went. The men and women in policing daily stepping forward into uncertainty and risk are truly remarkable and deserve admiration.
I'm Matt Ratner, head coach.
Matt Ratana was a New Zealander, a rugby fanatic, and at 54, close to retirement from the Met Police. His killer, Louis de Zoysa, is 25, a talented data analyst. At 13, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. His lawyer argued the shooting was a result of an autistic meltdown. He hadn't intended to harm the officer. In a wheelchair, de Zoysa gave evidence haltingly, was asked simple questions, and gave one-word answers. Now, police have quite limited powers when they search a suspect on the street, but it still seems extraordinary that they didn't find the revolver, and he was able to use it in handcuffs.
Just hold his jacket up for me.
The Independent Office for Police Conduct said the officers could have searched Zazoyza more thoroughly, but they didn't breach professional standards and will face no charges or discipline. The watchdog has recommended that in searches, all forces make greater use of metal detectors. Martin Brunt, Sky News at Northampton Crown Court.
Now, the Kakhovka Reservoir is the second largest in Europe and it's now dry following the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. It should supply a network of canals providing irrigation for over 1 million acres of farmland which produces 2 million tonnes of grain a year. The destruction of the dam at Nova Kakhovka has partially blocked a potential Ukrainian river crossing in the south of the country, potentially impacting their counter-offensive there. Floodwaters have also covered large parts of the area south of Kherson, displacing over 40,000 people. To the north of the dam, this is what the Dnipro River looked like in early June. But here are the images taken just 3 days ago. Waterways that sustained over 700,000 people have been reduced to a mere trickle. Our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn has spoken to those affected, and he begins his report in Belenki before travelling to the village of Makhanets near the Kakhovka Reservoir.
It was Europe's second biggest reservoir, but now looks more like a desert. What was a vast lake for 7 decades was robbed of its water in just a few days.
It's really sad and it's scary. We just want it to be like it used to be.
Andriy is an engineer in charge of pumping water out of the reservoir, sucked into these huge intakes.
Can you remember the moment that you heard the dam had been blown up? And what did you think when you heard that?
I didn't believe that something like that could happen. I can't believe that a human brain can even consider that kind of barbaric act. I just can't believe that.
In the pumping station, just birdsong. Its big Soviet-era machine should be pumping water at the rate of 4 million litres an hour. Not anymore. The water should be going into a vast network of pipes and canals in the months before harvest.
Normally this canal is full of water at a level way above my head. It's completely empty now and bone dry. The water is normally sucked into these big pipes and taken out onto the fields. Over 1 million acres of farmland on both sides of the reservoir depend on these canals for irrigation, giving you an idea of the scale of the disaster caused by the dam being blown up.
Ukraine may be famous for its rich black soil, but it's not much use without water. Farmer Anton says his harvest could be cut by as much as 2/3.
If we had water and the irrigation work, we could harvest 10 or 12 tonnes per hectare. But without it, we'll be lucky to get 5. It depends if it rains.
But there's more to worry about here. In the distant Zaporizhia nuclear power station, the Ukrainians say Russia has now mined it and could blow up part of it next. 6 miles from the plant on the Ukrainian side of the reservoir, the town of Makhanets. They've had no water in their taps here since the dam blew. It's being trucked in instead.
It's very bad, very bad. I have a small child and every day I need to carry at least 12 of these bottles.
And they're also deeply alarmed by what Vladimir Putin plans to do now.
Of course I'm worried. We're worried about the nuclear power station. We're worried about just about everything. Where should we go if something happened at the plant? Water's okay. We can cope with that. But if there's an explosion over there, what do we do?
Of course, because there are a lot of rumours. The power plant is mined. At any point, it could just blow. We already have no water in the river Dnipro, and they can easily just walk here.
The reservoir is no longer a natural defence against the enemy. Now it's been reduced to mudflats. The nuclear power station menaces the town across its rooftops. And there's the question, if Russians could destroy a dam and a reservoir, what are they planning to do here next? Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Makhanets.
Well, we have some breaking news to bring you tonight from Ukraine. We're hearing that the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group has accused Moscow of destroying his fighters. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, is with us. And what more can you tell us, Deborah?
Yes, it's a fairly extraordinary escalation in the vitriol between the head of the Wagner mercenary group and the Russian Ministry of Defense in a series of audio messages posted on his Telegram channel. Prigozhin has accused the Russian military of, like you said, destroying his fighters. He's also vowed to stop what he described as the evil of the Russian military leadership. He said that his call for a march for justice is not a military coup, but the Russian security services, according to Russian media, have launched now a criminal investigation into Prigozhin. The Russian president, Vladimir Putin, has been briefed about what has been happening. And in terms of the actual messages from Prigozhin about his allegations on one of their official Wagner Telegram channels, there's an unconfirmed video that shows what they say is a strike by a Russian military strike against a Wagner base, saying that this is where Wagner mercenaries were killed. Prigozhin also accuses the Russian defense minister of hiding the fact that 2,000 bodies of Wagner mercenaries were being kept in a morgue. It's a very, very serious escalation. The situation in Russia is obviously difficult to navigate, but in terms of challenges to the Russian leadership, certainly the Russian Ministry of Defense, it's a serious development that we will be watching very closely.
OK, Deborah, for now, thank you. Junior doctors in England will strike for 5 consecutive days next month in what they say is the longest single walkout in NHS history. It marks a dramatic escalation in their dispute with government over pay and conditions. The British Medical Association has called on ministers to produce a credible pay offer. The government, though, says junior doctors have turned their backs on negotiations by announcing further strikes. A Russian diplomat is squatting on the site of Moscow's proposed embassy in Canberra after the Australian government rejected the plan on national security grounds. Police are unable to arrest the man due to his diplomatic immunity, but the Australian Prime Minister says he is not a threat. Sky's Nicole Johnston reports.
A standoff unlike any other. A man described by local media as a Russian diplomat is holed up on a block of land in Canberra. This block was meant to be home to Russia's new embassy, but Australia changed its mind. It cancelled the lease last week, passing emergency legislation blocking Russia's plan to build an embassy here, arguing it's a threat to national security too close to Parliament House. Russia called it an unfriendly display by Australia and Russia-phobic hysteria. The man has been living on site since Sunday.
The national security threat that was represented by a Russian embassy on site are not the same as some bloke standing on a blade of grass on the site that we don't see really as a threat to our national security.
Just as well, if he is a diplomat, there's little the police can do because he could claim diplomatic immunity. Russia hasn't commented about the site's new resident, but it's barred 48 Australians from travelling to Russia and says it will take its case against the ban on its lease to the High Court. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Sydney.
The Arctic Monkeys are tonight's headline act at Glastonbury after its lead singer, Alex Turner, made a last-minute recovery from laryngitis. It's another band, though, that's currently making the headlines. Let's speak now to Sky's Katie Spencer, who's there for us tonight. So who's the big surprise, Katie? Look, you might be able to hear in the distance, it's all got very noisy here because Alex Turner and the Arctic Monkeys have begun within the last few minutes their much heralded headline slot. They weren't sure if he was going to be able to make this because of laryngitis. He very much is not sounding like a person with laryngitis, so I think he's well rested and it's done him some good. And for the thousands of people that packed out to see him, good news, no doubt. But look, it's not all about the Arctic Monkeys that everyone's been talking about today. A little earlier, the mystery was over, the mystery was solved. We've been speculating wildly over the last couple of weeks who the churn-ups were, this secret act that the big reveal was going to happen today, and now we know. It was the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl delivering very much a set that was worthy of being a headline slot in itself. And we know in the past, of course, they have headlined Glastonbury. But look, if they were to headline tonight or over the weekend, of course, it wouldn't make a difference to one of the main talking points of this Glastonbury, the fact that it's all the men that are getting the prime slots here on the Pyramid stage. It's something that people have been talking about for weeks and weeks. And here's what some of the stars had to say to us on that today.
Men, men, and more men. As Glastonbury campers settle into their temporary home, with Sir Elton, Arctic Monkeys and Guns N' Roses bagging all of the best slots on the Pyramid stage, there's quite a bit at Glastonbury to unpack. The big reveal of the much-hyped secret act listed as the Churn-Ups not helping matters by being another group of men, the Foo Fighters, whose frontman Dave Grohl was seen arriving by train. For rapper Stefflon Don, the lack of women taking top spots comes down to them having to work twice as hard to make it.
I feel like women do get a harder time, like they're critiqued a lot more, like for their body, for their weight, for their, you know what I'm saying, for a lot more. I feel like males get away with being a little bit more basic. Women have to do a little bit more as usual, as we do in our normal lives. We have to do so much more. But yeah, that's the way it is for now. Hopefully it'll change.
Glastonbury co-organiser Emily Eavis has said the festival is looking to book 2 female headliners next year, but says this situation has all come about because of an industry pipeline problem, leading to a shortage of viable female headliners being developed.
But according to the Lightning Seeds frontman Ian Brodie, it isn't the only area the industry should look at.
With streaming, it's more about songs than it is about albums. And I think albums are kind of what make big headline bands. It's almost like the Arctic Monkeys were the last one through that gate, almost.
For Billy Bragg, what's being sung matters just as much as who's singing.
I have a song called Sexuality, so I've changed the lyrics. So it now says, just because you're they, I won't turn you away. If you stick around, I'm sure we can find the right pronouns. The trans community need cisgender people to stand up for them.
For these festival goers, good music is all that matters. But to see a real difference to who's on stage here, the industry needs to start dancing to the same beat as those who are calling for change. Katie Spencer, Sky News on Worthy Farm.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up next, a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview, including this story on the front of the Mail tomorrow. The headline focusing on Jeremy Hunt's meeting with mortgage lenders. It'll be up there in just a few minutes' time. Tonight we have the columnist Alison Morris and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng taking us through all the newspapers. We'll see in just a few minutes' time. Hello there, very good evening. You're watching Sky News. In a few minutes' time, the press preview is coming up. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive here at Sky News. First, though, let's remind you of our top stories tonight. Canadian investigators have begun looking into what caused the Titan submersible to implode, killing all 5 people on board. Mortgage lenders have agreed measures to help people struggling with repayments, including a 12-month grace period for repossessions. And a 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering Sergeant Matt Ratana, who was shot dead in a Met Police holding cell. Hi there, you are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive here to us at Sky News. Time to see what's making the headlines with our fantastic guests as well tonight. Alison Morris, columnist with the Belfast Telegraph, joins as well. So does the former Conservative Special Advisor, Anita Boateng. Very good to have you both on the programme. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight this evening. Let's have a look at what's on some of those front pages for you now, starting with the Mail. It leads on mortgages with the headline Mortgage Crisis, Hunt easing the pain, in reference to Jeremy Hunt striking a deal with banks to help families hit by surging mortgage repayments. Jeremy Hunt's mortgage pact also takes the lead for the FT tomorrow. Their headline reads, Banks to delay repossessions for 12 months. Onto the Telegraph, it also has that story on their front cover, quoting Grant Shapps with the headline, Households spared £120 net zero levy. The Times tomorrow leads with the claim that millions of public sector workers face having pay rises of 6% blocked by the government amid mounting concerns that they would fuel inflation. While the Mirror reports on the doctors' 5-day strike, saying medics ramp up action with the longest walkout in NHS history. UK hit by Ozempic shortages for weight loss drug is the lead for the newspaper, which reports on an unprecedented demand in the popular injection has led to supply issues. On to The Guardian for you, reporting on a tsunami of dangerous vapes flooding into the UK. Caring Prince's mission to honour Diana's memory is the headline on the Express tomorrow morning, reporting on Prince William's steely determination, it says, to tackle homelessness in honour of his late mother. Invasion of the killer hornets is the Daily Star's report on a horde of hornets that could kill people with their stings, which are set apparently to invade Britain. Well, a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us. And of course, we hope that you do. And of course, as I said earlier, we're tonight joined by Alison Morris and Anita Boateng. Let's go and chat to them now and start with some really interesting front pages to get through. Ladies, very good evening to you and welcome. Let's start with the Daily Mail and its front page. Mortgage crisis, Hunt eases the pain. Of course, well-documented in meeting today with Jeremy Hunt and some of the Britain's biggest banks, CEOs, all in number 11. What do you make of the coverage? Let's start with you, Alison. What do you make of how the Daily Mail have set it out?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is interesting because we had heard that there may have been some sort of financial help to people who are in mortgage crisis. I suppose much in the way that we had those fuel payments during the winter months, but instead the Daily Mail and a lot of the other papers are reporting Jeremy Hunt's plans. He signed up a charter with some of the major lenders. So far, HSBC and Barclays have both signed up to this to say that they will give people a minimum of 12 months from the date of their first default before they initiate repossession proceedings. I think currently it's around 3 months, a minimum of 3 months. And then there's other ideas such as letting people go onto an interest-only mortgage for 6 months or letting them extend the life of their mortgage. But all of that is obviously just delaying or sort of putting the problems down the road a bit. My own mortgage, my fixed rate ran out 2 months ago and it has jumped by £115 a month. Which, it'll be fine, I'll cope. But I mean, it's enough to put a lot of people's, lights out if they're working to a very tight budget. And a lot of people are in a lot worse situations than that. I know so many people who are saying that their mortgage payments have jumped so much, they're going to have to maybe get rid of their car, they're going to have to make other massive savings in order to deal with it. And the last thing the government want is a repeat of that crisis of 2008, when we've seen so many people lost their homes as a result of the financial crisis. So clearly this is all an attempt to try and make sure that we don't have a repeat of what happened then.
That's a huge amount of money you're talking about, Alison. And we know, Anita, that 2.4 million households are coming off fixed-rate mortgages next year. Of course, next year is an important year, isn't it, politically, because it's going to be a general election year as well. I mean, do you think that the Conservative government are doing enough when you hear the likes of Labour saying it's a weak response, the Liberal Democrats saying it's a sticking plaster for a gushing wound? What do you think?
Well, I think this is all very much politics, because the reality of the situation is the government's proposal and agreement with the lenders goes further than what Labour suggested, for instance, around the kind of grace period. They wanted 6 months. The government has agreed with the lenders a 12-month grace period. But the fundamental issue here that the government is seeking to tackle alongside the Bank of England is high inflation. And inflation makes absolutely everybody poorer. And it has devastating effects, particularly on the most poor. And so, increasing interest rates, which is very painful, is a bank's way of being able to reduce people's spending power in order to get inflation under control. So the government is not going to be able to counterbalance what the interest rates are supposed to do by giving people more money, because that will not tackle the core issue, which is inflation. So I think there is quite a lot of politics here in Labour and the Liberal Democrats saying the government isn't doing enough, because they know that if the government were to sort of say, well, actually, we're going to make sure that people have more financial help in the form of, I don't know, reduced payments or payments of support, that would counterbalance what the interest rate rises are supposed to achieve. And so fundamentally, I think what the government is hoping is that in helping the very, very small number of people who will be really deeply affected by this, so in terms of those mortgage rate payers who, are in danger of, forbearance effectively, so needing this drastic help, you keep that safety net very strong in agreement with lenders, but you do allow interest rates to stay where they are in order to tackle inflation is the approach that they're taking, which makes sense to me. Yeah, well, let's continue the discussion and look at how other newspapers are covering it. The FT Weekend's front page, as you would imagine, has got this as their main story. And just reading a bit further into that article, Alison, that they quote Pantheon Economics that forecast today that house prices are going to fall 10% peak to trough, after previously anticipating an 8% fall, adding that they expect the downturn to be drawn out with prices not reaching the floor until the beginning of 2024. I mean, it's very grim news, isn't it, potentially?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, this is an obvious, it's an obvious knock-on effect from what is happening financially everywhere else, because as the interest rate's high, people just can't afford mortgages. But it also means that people are stuck in a sort of rental cycle where they're paying very high rent to live somewhere, which means they don't have any savings, and it means they'll probably never get on the property ladder in their lifetime. And this is all, again, I mean, whether or not they delay, and part of this, obviously, the repossession, that they're not allowed to start foreboding proceedings until 12 months. But if you have a young family and you're struggling, it doesn't matter whether you're going to lose your house in 3 months or 12 months, you're going to lose your home. And that then pushes up pressure on the rental market as well, because there's just less homes and more demand, and the price of that goes up. So this has a massive knock-on effect, which will continue well after this current crisis that we see ourselves in into the years that come, because as we know from what happened in 2008 and 2009 and during that property bubble, and when all of that bust, it took a decade for that to straighten itself out, and this isn't going to be something that's going to be resolved in a year or two.
OK, we're going to continue the discussion in our 11 o'clock hour here on Sky News. Let's have a look at some of the other front pages now. Anita, back to you. On the front page of the Daily Mirror, they choose a different story to go with. The news today that doctors are going to go for a 5-day strike, 5 days in a row, we have to say, next month, to coincide, we believe, with the 75th anniversary of the NHS. What do you make of their coverage in this story?
Well, yes, as you say, this is going to have huge impact on the NHS and the country at large. The Mirror announces that there's going to be this 5-day strike from the 13th until the 18th of July, and that will obviously see thousands of operations cancelled. This will be the fourth strike by junior doctors in England, and the fundamentals here are that the British Medical Association is asking for a 35% pay increase, which the government says is unaffordable. And the Labour Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, agrees. And the government has offered a 5% pay bump to end the dispute. So it looks like the two sides are very, very far apart. And once again, you're going to have a situation where so many operations are cancelled, and the knock-on impact on NHS waiting lists will be, loud and clear.
Yeah, and more misery for patients, as you say, who have been waiting long enough anyway on the NHS. Let's bring you back here, Alison, and tie this with the front page of the Times, because it does go quite well in terms of their lead story, that being a potential pay blow for millions of public sector workers. The Times newspaper says that millions of public sector workers face having their pay rises of 6% blocked by the government amid mounting concerns that they will fuel inflation. Of course, we know that junior doctors and nurses are involved in that as well. I mean, tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that obviously the government are saying if they increase the pay, which in terms of inflation, most people have received what is in effect a pay cut over the last 5 years, because inflation has increased much quicker than especially those sort of public sector wages have, that it's going to fuel inflation just by paying people a wage that they can manage to survive on. It's quite short-sighted, because if you look at what the Mirror is saying about the doctor's strike, and then if you look at other public services and other threats of strikes in relation to that as well, that costs so much more than it would to try and negotiate a decent pay rise for those workers who are essential workers. These are the people we stood at doors and clapped for, during the COVID pandemic. If they are paid a decent wage that they're able then to go to work, we don't have these knock-on strikes. I mean, that's obviously a saving to the government and also a saving to people, especially those who are on hospital waiting lists. I live in a part of the UK that has the highest waiting list in the UK. Northern Ireland's health service is practically on its knees. It just is no longer functioning. There's no longer free healthcare at the point of need, because there is such a big backlog and such long waiting lists. And that is something that, in terms of the longer knock-on effect on people's health, we know that if people don't receive healthcare and proper healthcare when they need it at that time, well, then that knocks on to more serious symptoms and more serious illnesses, which just in the long run end up costing more money to treat, or ultimately it means that people lose their lives prematurely. So I do think that, the government's going to have to come a bit further, but also some of those public sector unions are maybe going to have to move back a little bit in order to meet the government as well, in order to resolve this. But just simply saying, no, we can't give you a wage that you can live on because it'll increase inflation, I don't think that is a good enough answer.
Yeah, Anita, if we read into the article a bit more, it says ministers are weighing up the private recommendations from the pay review bodies, and two senior government sources have told the newspaper they are likely to take the rare step of overruling some of those recommendations. I mean, that's a bold move from the government, isn't it? Particularly when they've already got a fight in their hand with many public sector workers.
Yes, it is. But I think we have to return to the central issue, which is inflation. Now, I'm not saying that the reason for inflation is, wage spiral. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that actually we know the causes of inflation were, hugely global. But the thing the government has to work flat out to try to prevent is that inflation becoming deeply embedded in the UK economy, such that everybody gets poorer in ways that can be potentially devastating. So the government is looking at doing absolutely everything it can to bear down on some of the factors that can increase inflation. And so the independent pay review body has obviously been an incredibly important part of the negotiation and determining what kind of recommendation makes sense, taking into account everything to do with the economy. But I think the government here is managing some expectations here. There may need to be some tough decisions taken. And I don't envy the government in this, because they absolutely want to retain and motivate staff. They know they have challenges to deliver the kinds of public services that people want, but they also know they have to manage and tame the tiger of inflation, or the pain could get much, much, much worse. And so this is going to be dancing on a head of a pin and really, really difficult and tense negotiations to come in a year where, the economy is already, when it comes to the issue of inflation, core inflation remaining stubbornly high, that there are the positive signs that you might hope to see at this moment, halfway through the year.
And in a word, Anita, because we're running out of time, do you believe or do you have faith that Rishi Sunak can halve inflation by the end of the year, as he has promised to do?
Well,
yes
the
or
bank
no?
is the one who's in charge. I think that it's on a knife edge.
OK, thank you. We'll leave it there. We'll come straight back to you after this short break. Coming up next, we're going to look at this story. It's on the front page of the I newspaper tomorrow. UK hit by Ozempic shortages for weight loss drug. We'll get more on that with our columnists in just a few minutes' time. See you shortly.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want them. And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account.
I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families.
But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
The pound has rallied, moderation, interest rates peaking.
And up at 6%.
The highest for 14 years.
Will that be the peak? Will it be a little bit lower?
Crisis. It's closer to a potential crash.
So many words, so many meanings. But what do they mean for you and your finances? Stay up to date on Sky News.
Hello there, welcome back. A very good evening to you. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight is the columnist Alison Morris and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. Great to have you both with us tonight. Thanks so much for staying with us. Let's have a look at some of the other pages which are on the, well, stories I should say, which are on the front pages tomorrow. And we're going to start with the Telegraph. And the Telegraph, ladies, actually has got a lot of stories on its front page tomorrow. A very small one in the kind of bottom left-hand corner. It looks like Sir Keir Starmer, Labour leader, has done an interview with the Daily Telegraph, Alison. Maybe he's trying to win over their readers, who knows. Says he doesn't want to, and he's going to try to avoid increasing income tax if he wins the election next year.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not going to find his core vote, you know, doing interviews there. But at the same time, too, we know that there's an election coming next year. Already, we're in full election mode, and the polls are showing that, despite being quite a weak leader of the opposition, that Sir Keir Starmer is on track, and we've seen that to have a very small, possibly majority, but certainly to be able to form a government after the next election. That's what he's aiming for. The thing is, you know, he has been dealing with a complete turmoil that's been happening in the Conservative Party for the last year, and that has now stabilised. So he's up against a much more stable Prime Minister in Rishi Sunak. So a lot of that will be financial, because we know that a lot of what's going to be part of that election, what's going to be appealing to voters, is dealing with the financial crisis, is dealing with inflation, the cost of living, the price of food in supermarkets, the price of fuel, all of those sort of things. And so that is I think he's now going for that sort of Middle England vote, the vote that he lost quite a lot of in the last general election. But at the same time, too, a lot of what I have seen from Keir Starmer, a lot of what he has said, a lot of those policies, none of them are really very substantial. They all seem a bit soundbitey at the minute, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's an interesting move. You can see that already. They're already in full election mode, even though we've got quite a bit of time to go.
Yeah, Anita, let's get your views, of course, as a former Conservative Special Advisor. Do you think Sir Keir Starmer, if he becomes Prime Minister, could avoid increasing income tax for the top earners in this country? What do you think?
No, in a word. And it's interesting that the headline says Labour won't raise top rate of tax, but actually what the story then says is Keir Starmer said he does not want to increase the top rate of tax. I think that Labour is grappling with a conundrum that is going to continue to bedevil it in the next sort of year and a half, which is, how do they set out a programme that feels genuinely new and exciting and offers solutions around whether it's, you know, public sector investment and all of that, without making some pretty bold commitments around how they're going to pay for all of these innovations. And we've seen Labour in recent weeks talk about how it's not going to spend £28 billion every single year the minute it gets into power on their green transformation, but instead they're going to ramp up to this amount of money. And I think that, again, they've accepted that costs of borrowing are going up, and that's going to be expensive. So I think that this dynamic around them showing more leg beyond with tiny amounts of tax raising that they've talked about right now is going to be quite important.
I'm going to jump in just because we're running out of time, and I really want to get to the front page of the newspaper. Alison, to you first. UK hit by Ozempic shortage. This is the type 2 diabetes weight loss drug. Tell us more, very briefly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is fueled by celebrities, people like Elon Musk, who have said that they're using Ozempic. You know, there's a lot of speculation that other very high-profile celebrities have been using Ozempic to lose massive amounts of weight, and that obviously filters down, especially, you know, to very sort of young men and women who are maybe being influenced by that, and so it's created a shortage, which means that there's a shortage of the drug in terms of what it's actually intended to do, what it was made for, which was not as a weight loss drug, but as a drug for type 2 diabetics.
OK, hold that thought. Plenty more from both of you from 11 o'clock onwards. Do stay with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a look at the weather for you now for the weekend ahead.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A hot weekend for many people, particularly in the southeast of England, before things turn milder and more mobile next week. First thing on Saturday, it's going to be rather grey for many areas. Most places are going to be dry. There'll be a few outbreaks of rain dotted around, mostly in the west of Scotland. During the morning, the cloud will continue to come and go for many places. Despite the cloud, it's going to be a really warm day tomorrow. The hottest weather is likely to be in the southeast of England, where temperatures are expected to climb to 30 degrees.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.